Call to order. Harley, would you like to do roll call?
Yeah, we're
Please.
gonna start at 6 o'clock here. Tom Flannery,
Here?
Aaron Balderson is absent, Jeremiah Kuchenberg.
Here.
Kayla Levy is absent, and Jason Martin.
Oh.
Jason, are you here? Okay, perfect.
All right, can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, the agenda's been approved. All in, do I have to do that?
Yep.
And everyone?
Yes, you do.
Any further discussion? No further discussion. Proceed to vote. All in favor? Signify by aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. I'd like to welcome our visitors. Thank you for being here. We do have a couple of blue cards. Just a reminder, there's a 5-minute time frame on talking to them. Harley will keep track of that if you could, please, Harley. And we'll start with Bethany, if you could, please.
Yes, I did notice on tonight's agenda that you have the first review of the board policies that we had highlighted and removed from the initial review in November. I'm excited. This is a time I hope you guys have an opportunity to put a critical eye to those. I do know board policies a lot of times are bound by legal court cases that have come through an Iowa code, but I still think it's an opportunity to take a look, make sure we're really purposeful in our language. And then, even if nothing else, one of them highlighted is the student grievance policy. You may not choose to change anything, but it still references Iowa Code 2007. So even just bringing that up to code, making sure that code still applies, because I had to dig through the archives for the 2007 version. So when these come back up in 5 more years, that's going to be over 20 years old. So just hoping we don't rubber stamp these and we take time to really go through them.
Excellent. Thank you. Is that all?
Yep, that's it.
Okay. And then, Christina, I have yours here as well.
It's along the same lines, so thank you. I know this is the first reading of the handbook changes and that there will be several to follow. I too would encourage the board to really dig in and strengthen those policies. Really look at ways that we can give further tools to the administration and guidance as well to those leaders within our school to course correct students that perhaps take the rules with some latitude, as well as to support the education of those students that are following the rules. Many times I think issues have been reluctant to be brought forward. I know some firsthand because students aren't trusting or don't believe that anything will be done. I think this needs to change. To improve the school safety and our students' sense of belonging. I think that's so important, and the culture here at Alburnett is one that we've always been proud of. We have a rich history, and I want that to continue. So as we take a review of our policies, I think it's an opportunity to make them current to today's student climate. There have been a number of cases over the past year with respect to safety, everything from harassment to bullying to bodily assault across the state, and a lot of things that have gone through the court system, and maybe those are opportunities for us to look and review and grow from so that we can continue a safe environment here for all of our kiddos. So I appreciate you taking time to review them. That's all I have.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to board reports. We have no department leaders from curriculum departments, administrators, none, business manager.
I do have a couple things. Yeah, there's actually nothing really to be passed out. I just had it ready. So the first topic I wanted to talk about was just the election that's coming up and just highlighting some dates for the school board election. So August 28th is the first date for candidate filing. And then another important date would be, well, there's a withdrawal. The final date is the September 21st for the November election on the 7th. And then we will take our organizational meeting on November 20th after the campus vote. So Tom, are you up for election? No.
I don't believe so. I
You're
think it's just
No,
No,
Aaron,
it's a
Kayla.
okay, it's Jason
Aaron,
and the other
Jason,
two, okay.
and then Kayla, she's not, she's
Yes.
not, so.
So I did print out packets, if any of the board members here wanted them, obviously it doesn't apply to you two. But I do have them available for anyone else, if you guys are out and about talking. I have these ready, and then if you have any questions.
I might get one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't want it to? Okay. Well, I have more, and it is online, and the county office also will print them out, but, so. Any questions on the election? Jason, any questions from you?
Hey, Artie, how many signatures and when do we start, getting signatures, taking signatures?
Yeah, Jason, you can get signatures anytime. You have to have 26 signatures. And like I said, the first day that you can file it with me is August 28th. And it has to be done by September 21st.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So I see there's 2 sheets in here for signatures.
Just because there's more, you need more than the 15 that are allowed on there, I think.
Well, one is a nomination petition for college community
Oh,
trustee.
sorry, get rid of that
Or
one.
community college trustee.
Yeah, you just want the one, but you need to make a copy of it.
Oh, this
Because
one.
you'll need more.
Yeah, I apologize, I just
I think
printed
that's
out
what I did
that.
last year, I had to make a copy of that.
That must be the one that doesn't, should be in.
Yep, so, but you will need a copy of that because you'll need more than the 15 that are
Sure.
on there.
26 you need.
26, and important is that you make sure every page has the exact same information on it on the header,
Okay.
top of it, so. And my other topic was indirect cost, so we've done this a couple of years now, 2, actually. So the federal awards that the nutrition fund program receives allow for indirect cost. So it would essentially be the general fund recouping some of the cost to run the nutritional program that's not directly coded there. So, for example, myself, because I do work for the nutrition department, although I am not technically coded to the nutrition department, same with our custodial staff. So they come out with what they call an indirect cost rate, and it's a percentage of the revenue you receive through your federal programming. In the past couple of years, we've done 50% of what we are allowed to do. That was just something we kind of came up with because we didn't feel that we needed to recoup the full cost. I still feel that way. In the past, it was about 25,000, and this year it is only 9,000. And the difference is because our federal income came down because we're no longer receiving all of the funding for COVID.
Oh.
So in the past, we had received over $400,000 in the nutritional fund for COVID because all the meals that were ate were free to our students, so essentially it was coming through federal funding. Well, now our students are paying for that, and so our revenue has been reduced to $174,000 through federal funding. We're getting, it's offset by actual revenue from parents. But you can only calculate your indirect cost off of that federal funding, which is why this is less this year. I still think we should stay at the 50% and maybe reevaluate next year because I just want to watch the trajectory of the nutrition fund now that parents are paying again. So anyway, so this doesn't take board action, but I've always just thought it's something I need to keep you guys up to date on because it is an inter-fund transfer, not by resolution. So I will be moving $9,817 from the nutrition fund as an expense, paying the general fund. Any questions on that? That's all I have.
Okay, board members, do you have anything? Jason?
Nope, I'm good, thank you.
Okay, superintendent, off to you.
All right. So the first one, which I think most people are worried about, is the construction update. We're trying to get them to give us the hard dates. They're still trying to stick with the idea that, They initially told me just last week that they were gonna have the band and choir room done on August 1st, and the rest of the auditorium done on the 25th. Of August. They actually have already come back and said the band room's not gonna be done on August 1st, because they still need to be able to get the lifts in and out of that corner area in order to get into the auditorium all the way through doing the punch list. So then they can't put the cabinets in on the side, which means they can't put the carpet in on that room. We did have the inspectors come out from Lynn County, and we were able to work something out with them where we'll still be able to have occupancy of the choir room when school starts, not the band room. So we're gonna put the band in choir, at least temporarily, because they're gonna have more equipment, more need, et cetera, going on that route. But, when they say the 25th, I think realistically it's like mid-September. So when they say the August 25th date. We have done, thanks to OPN as well, like they've helped work through this. And now I do a daily walkthrough every day with the superintendent of the Apex company for the project, and we do a count, worker count, to see how many workers are here, and kind of verify that, in addition to, they now do a daily update, and that was a suggestion from OPN on the daily update of like what you're getting accomplished, what got accomplished today, what's supposed to get accomplished tomorrow, and kind of that task list. We've seen progress since implementing that. We had, at least in the sense of having more workers, because I think it was single-digit workers that were here per day. Now, we're closer to like 20, usually, versus that, at least on the days I've done the walkthrough with him. And there have been a couple days where I've been at like new superintendent workshops and things, we haven't done those walkthroughs. So I couldn't speak to those specific days, but I do think that's improved. I don't think that the August 25th is a realistic deadline for the auditorium to be done. I know they're telling me that, and I don't have the construction background, but historically, based on how they've kind of met those things, I do think mid-September is probably a more realistic date. And I told them I was gonna say that.
And they didn't argue.
It's not
Well-
passing your eye, does it?
What?
It's not passing your eye test.
No.
It's not passing mine either.
So I think that, and I've talked to our band teacher as well, to let him know that he'll be starting in the choir room for there as well. And, you know, obviously he would love to be in the band room, but, so that'll be something that we're gonna kind of move forward with there. We'll keep following up. I have those daily walkthroughs scheduled every morning on my calendar at 8 AM, so. And if you ever wanna come with, feel free, especially, you two having that construction expertise, or, I mean, anybody, if you wanna come through with me any of those times, just give me a heads up, and then we can do that walkthrough at 8 AM, you can come with me and kind of see where they're at on anything. So, but yeah, so there's the construction update, just so if people are asking you out and about, I would say that realistically, it's probably more like a mid-September. And that's the date I'm gonna be giving people, because I don't wanna go back and say August 25th and then have it be September. So, I mean, maybe I should do October, I don't know. We're gonna go with that. So that was the first one there. The second one was the newsletter, and so traditionally we've done 9 newsletters. And thanks to Harley, she kind of helped explain this, the cost piece to me, but the idea is that we, with especially how the postal service has changed it, we spend about, I think it was $12,000 a year in sending that newsletter out. And I don't know if we necessarily get the return for that, doing it 9 times a year. So what I would like to do is, I'm gonna move that down to more of like a quarterly during the school year. So we do one at the beginning of the year to welcome people in the paper format, I should say. One at the beginning of the year, then we'll do one kind of before parent-teacher conferences in the fall semester, one before parent-teacher conferences in the spring, and then at the end of the year. So then that way, we're really in essence having it, and so that'll hopefully cut the cost of it in half as well. I think we'll still get a similar bang for our buck in that sense, because I don't think that, you know, if you're doing it once a month anymore, especially with social media and our flyer app, which has a new name now, Reachwell, thank you, sorry. The Reachwell app and everything, I think that timeliness, you still send anything you want timely that way. And so I think that, you know, when you're using the newsletter, it's more of a, here is your like, here's great things we're doing and things like that, but it doesn't necessarily matter if you hear about it, if there's like a week or two difference in when you would have heard about it, or maybe in the 3 week. But I think from my interviews with community members, it's still important to send out, because my initial thought had been, when you even just not do it, you kind of focus on the digital aspect. But a lot of community members said that's how we reach some of our older generation, and so still doing it, but trying to reduce that excessive cost on doing it in that sense.
Is the first newsletter gonna be sent out pre?
Before, like right before
like
school
the
starts.
week before
Mhm.
school starts or whatever? Okay.
Mhm. So we do one, that also gives staff that are coming back time to add things to the newsletter, because they'll do their work days, their floating work day, somewhere 2 weeks before. And then, so if I want to get information from the staff, that gives me a little time to get that as well. Since not, I wouldn't expect them to be checking their email before they really start either, although I found many of them do. So, yeah. But that was the newsletter, just wanted to have an update on that so you were aware of it, especially people are asking why do I not get this every month for a few of them. And we'll see how it goes. If it doesn't go well, we can always change it again, but it'll also give us a better picture of where we're heading with that and go that route.
We've heard a lot of positive comments too with the newsletter, so.
And you know what, if they come back and people say, you know what, I really don't like that, we can always go back to it next year and
Sure.
go back to the numerical ones, but. That was it?
All right, on to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, the motion to approve the consent agenda has been moved and seconded. Do we have any further discussion? No further discussion, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor, signify by aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Dialogue action items. First, we'll start with appointing the board secretary / treasurer.
You just have to do this every year.
It's recommended the board appoint Harley McBurney as board secretary / treasurer. I have a motion.
I'll make a motion to appoint Harlan Bernie as board secretary / treasurer.
I'll second the motion.
Motion has been moved and seconded. Do we have any further discussion? No further discussion, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor signify by aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Congratulations. Next, we're appointing board counsel.
So what you're going to see there are two, so I asked for proposal letters from two firms. So we currently use Holland, Michael, Raber, and Sing Firm Services out of Iowa City. And then there's Allers and Cooney, which is out of Des Moines. So Allers and Cooney is the one that I'm more familiar with, that actually is used around the state more frequently. But either way, it's good practice every year before you appoint your legal counsel to get proposals from at least two different firms. There's not a ton of firms in the state that actually represent schools. Oftentimes, their main focus is a different area, and they do kind of schools on the side, which sometimes has the positive because they might be nearby you, which is usually the positive of that, and why people might use them, particularly for the schools that are further away from like Des Moines. But I do think there's another one, like Sioux City, that does represent schools more frequently. Obviously, Holland has represented some schools here in Iowa City area. So I got proposals from both of those two firms, so there'd be some comparison values there. If you look at the proposals, you're gonna see that Allers and Cooney is a little bit more expensive, but there's reasoning for that. They do exclusive school law. So, and they're one of the only firms in the state that do exclusively school law. So they have a team approach that does a variety of different areas, so you'll have an expert in every area that you can ask, and if there's somebody you're working with that doesn't know the answer, they have an expert on a different team. So they have multiple members that kind of focus in different sub-areas of educational law. I don't have any experience with Holland, Michael, Raber, and Sue, but I did have a lot, as I mentioned, with Allers and Cooney, and I've had a lot of great experiences with them as well. That team approach has been very helpful for me because of that. So the things, again, to keep in mind is Allers and Cooney is a little bit more expensive on the hourly rate because they're also different per lawyer you get. So the ones with more experience, they charge a larger hourly rate. So you need to use their expertise, it can be more expensive. The ones that are newer to their firm are about similar rate to Holland, Michael, and Weber. If you look at their rate schedules, neither one of them require a retainer fee, which is good. And so, my recommendation is to use Allers and Cooney, specifically because of their experience in their team approach. You know, again, I don't have any experience with Holland, Michael, I'm sure they're very good, but on the same token, I don't think that their sole focus is educational law, and I do think that that's sometimes very beneficial in dealing with certain situations that arise. And I don't think in the long term, it'll be a very drastic difference in expense in the long term, because we don't use them that frequently. Of course, there's always the chance something unexpected could come up, but generally, based on the frequency of use, you know, I wouldn't expect more than maybe like $1,000 difference, unless, like I said, something more intense came up that we had to utilize them for.
Another point to be made there, Will, is Joe Holland, who's been kind of our go-to. He's retired.
Yes.
So he's not going to be with that firm anymore either. So that's another fun fact that makes it easier to do that transition.
Yeah, so it'd be a good time to do it as well, when you're kind of switching hands in the firm.
And to add on as well, Allers and Cooney is not completely unknown to the district. We use them for a lot of our fiscal law, so like our bond agents, they did all that, so.
All right.
So we just need to.
You need to make a motion.
To
Mhm.
appoint one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I guess I'll make a motion to appoint, Allers and Cooney firm service.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, the motion's been moved and seconded for Allers and Cooney Firm Services. Any further discussion? No further discussion, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor, signify by aye.
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 Motion, all against it, same sign. Motion passes. Second one on ours, item C, is the resolution of financial depository.
If you click on it, you will see there are 3 different banks that, essentially what you're doing is you're just making a resolution that this is the max that I can deposit in each bank. We're not gonna exceed that. So, I mean, the only time we had ever had to come back and adjust this was when we took in bond proceeds, so. This is just by law something we have to do.
Is this, what's the average, I guess, of what we would be depositing or something like that? Is that,
So we were about 4 million, in our Farmers State Bank account.
okay,
The other one is,
I'll pull that up actually, that UMB,
UMB is where, so that's like a transition account for our bond payments.
okay.
And then the last one, American Funds, is where we keep some of our scholarship funds.
Okay.
But yeah, those are high numbers, just, and mostly because I don't wanna have to bring it back to you if,
Gotcha, okay. So that's just a maximum?
Yep.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. I'll make a motion for the resolution of financial depository. To approve the resolution of financial depository.
Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded for the resolution of financial depository. Any further discussion? No further discussion, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor, signify by aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Item D is to appoint the level 1 and level 2 investigators.
So every year, the board has to approve our level 1 and level 2 investigators. Traditionally, which is a good practice, it's level 1 investigator is going to be administration within the district. Level 2 would be a police force, such as a city police or sheriff's department. In our case, we would use Lynn County Sheriff as our level 2, with our principals as level 1. I do think that's still best practice. I think that's a good way to go. What a lot of schools also do is they'll add a third party in case of any kind of conflict of interest, And also sometimes, particularly in a smaller district, if it's gonna be a long investigation, that might take a lot of time of their administrator to perform. And so in that case, then you also have this person appointed that, you know, the principal could rely on if, again, if there was some kind of conflict of interest, but then more often, honestly, even when there's a long investigation that needs to occur. Because I can speak from my past experience, sometimes they take days of your time, and there's other things you need to be doing in the building. And so, but in order to do that, the board has to have appointed them as an option. And so, I did reach out to 5 different options. 2 of them no longer do it. One of them was not necessarily interested, and then one never responded back, and then Ann did. So Ann Morgan is the one that responded back with a proposal on that. So I've linked it with her rates in that sense. It's kind of an as needed, as long as it fits in her schedule, that she can do that. She was in the educational field as a background, and a lot of time spent in the AEA, and she's retired right now, so that's where she just basically does consulting in this kind of investigation. Had been a former administrator as well. So it's good practice to just have it as a third option, and so that's why I added that in there. And again, it only is utilized if there's a conflict of interest, or if we know it's gonna take a long time, especially when you don't have like an assistant principal. So when I was in Spencer, sometimes I would delegate that to my assistant principal if I knew it was gonna take a very long period of time, so he could focus on that. But if we were both busy, or he was in the National Guard, if he's gone, then we would use an outside third party, particularly for a long investigation.
So I think that's a really good idea. We had a great conversation about this, guys, and I think as we move forward, I think this is a really good plan.
So for the level 1, is that just one particular principal, or is that all of them?
It would be all of them, because they would do it at their own buildings.
Okay.
So Brian would be in charge of it at the high school,
Okay.
Josh middle school, Bailey at the elementary. And I do have quite a bit of experience doing level 1 and level 2, so I'd be a resource for them. I actually had to do level 2 often as well, in conjunction with our school resource officer sometimes. So, which is not very common, but happened periodically.
So do these need to be separate motions for level 1 and 2, and then Ann Morgan for the third?
No, that's all in one, so you just can add that all into one motion. It's long,
So is the Ann Morgan, is she, since she retired though,
Mhm.
I mean, said as long as it fits in her schedule.
Correct. And that was the unfortunate part, but on the same token, she was about the only one that gave me a proposal.
Sure.
We could look at, if one of them ever gets back to me again, we could look at doing that and adding them in.
Okay.
That's
That's something we could add at any time.
You can, as long as we bring it to the board policy. So if we find that we try to use her and she's never available, we can do that.
It wouldn't be very frequent.
I don't think it'd be very frequently where she's gonna have a conflict in that sense.
Or that we would have to use her.
Oh, no. Realistically, like I said, you don't wanna make it a common practice to always use an outside investigator in level 1, level 2. Most of the time, they can be resolved fairly quickly with just a little bit of information, as long as we follow the process. But on the same token, there are some times where it is a long process,
Mhm.
and it can take a lot of time, and those are the times where I think it's beneficial to have that available for the principal. It's a lot cheaper than honestly having a vice principal or assistant principal. And then on the same token, like I said, if there's ever a conflict of interest, which is pretty rare as well too,
Right.
but all of our administrators have kids in school, so that same process of mine as well, mine will be in the school as well. So it's good practice to have that as an option, so then, if their child was involved in one of them, they can say, I'm gonna hand this over to Ann.
Will, are you a level 1 investigator, or are you wanting to continue to be a level 1 investigator?
I would be honest that I would say that'd be a lot of time. Not because I think,
Just 3 principles.
I would say the 3 principles would be best. Because what happens is if you get into some of those, like I said, there was a level 1 investigation, it took me like a week. I was unavailable to do my role. And I think that would be a little bit challenging as the I mean, I don't know my whole job yet, because I'm new, but I do think,
I think that'd be consistent with what we've done before here.
yeah. And I think usually you avoid having the, if you have like a director, so if you have like a director of secondary ed or a director of school improvement, things like that, I had that role as well. I was also a level 1 when I was a central office administrator, but most superintendents don't have that role. And I personally would like to keep it that way, so then that way I don't get pulled into a longer investigation, and I'd rather be a resource for the administrators to use, kind of empower them to do that within their own building, so.
I agree with that too.
If you are looking to make a motion, you can read the last 2 sentences or sentence of where it says appoint the building principal instead, just describe it. Are you following?
Okay, yeah, those last 3 lines.
Yep.
Okay. All right, I'll make a motion to appoint the building principals as level 1 investigators, and Lynn County Sheriff as level 2 investigators, and utilize Ann Morgan as a third-party level 1 or level 2 investigator if there's ever a conflict of interest.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, the motion's been moved and seconded. Do we have any further discussion? No further discussion, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor, signify by aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Teacher Quality Committee appointments.
So you just need to appoint the administration part of that teacher quality appointment, and then the teachers themselves will be, we can appoint those. But you as the board need to appoint the administrative participants, which I recommend all of our administrative team.
What exactly are they going to be doing with that?
Yeah, so there's certain funds that come with the teacher quality, and you have to collaborate with the teachers in order to do that and use those funds. And so the administration collaborates with the teachers to determine how they're used, and so then again, the board would appoint the administrators that they would like to work on that. And since it's really a K-12 piece, it's important to have representation for the administrators and the teachers, K-12, on doing that. And so that's where that kind of comes in. I'm in there as a district perspective. In a bigger district, you probably have, you might honestly just appoint your director of secondary education and your director of elementary education, but because then those two together could give you a district perspective versus in a smaller district, you're probably gonna want each principal in your soup.
And the teacher quality is actually teacher leader compensation. It's very confusing, but they're essentially setting the budget of teacher leader compensation and how that funding will
Is
be
that like
spent.
connected to that PLC stuff then? too?
Yes, so that's our instructional coaches, that's our, all of our collaborative team leaders. And so setting their salaries and stipends, not their, but like all of their pay and how we're gonna utilize it to train them. So if we used any funds from that, like, I'm assuming we did for the PLC at work,
Yeah.
that's what I.
Well, can we use can we allocate any of the funds that we get for like at risk? Can any of those funds be steered towards that?
No. At risk is pretty I mean, you can be free with it, but this is a very, like, it's a separate silo.
Okay.
Yeah. And actually, until this year, you couldn't even overlap it with anything, so.
When you think of teacher quality, it's about training our teachers. When you think about at-risk, it's about keeping those students here. Yeah,
So this is
It's
all,
really 2 separate.
yep,
this teacher quality committee is all focused more around teacher improvement, the
Yes.
quality of their instruction and.
Yep, and that coaching, the coaching cycles that our instructional coaches do, things like that. So I mean, for example, if they're doing a new coaching, instructional coaching model that they kind of introduced last year. And so the training that, in professional development, that they would do that. Joe, who's gonna be the new instructional coach to take over for Bailey, is gonna need to get trained in our model of doing that. There's a couple that, like, the one I'm more familiar with is Gym Night. I think we use NCE, I can't remember which one, I'll get back to you on that. But we use a different model here. But it's the same idea of getting him trained in that. Getting them trained in how to utilize collaborative teams and PLC would fall under that. The coaching cycle, things that they're gonna work on is all improving teacher quality, and then their roles in themselves.
Okay.
Alright, I'll make a motion to approve the teacher quality committee appointments.
I'll second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded to appoint Will Dibble, Bailey Wright, Josh Hendrickson, Brian Mortz as administrators to serve on, as the administrative portion of this committee. Any further discussion? No further discussion, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. IASB legislative priorities.
So we're members of the Iowa School Board Association, and they ask for our legislative priorities every year. I did include all of them, so you can see, but there's over 20 that they have for you to choose from. And then they would like to know all of their member boards and such to say, what are your top 4 that you would like to submit? And then that's what they focus on when the legislative session comes into play, and they focus on trying to help develop and work with legislators on policy around those priorities that are most chosen by their members. And so, I very much, I cut it down to about 10 that I thought were beneficial. I kept the 4 that you had chosen from last year at the top, and then I added a couple on as well. And I will freely admit that this is from not as in-depth knowledge as I would like about the whole district, as I'm still learning, but I think these are good general ones across the board. One I would like to just point out is private school choice specifically is that one that deals with their ESAs or their vouchers, basically. And I think that that one is, the idea would be is you really want it to be an equal playing field of that between public schools and private in that sense. And that's, I think, something that I think anybody should be able to get behind. I mean, because the idea for them was the competition is good for that, which is fine as long as you have an equal playing field. Like if you have 2 businesses that are both competing for the same customers, if they can't start at the same spot, it's not really fair in that sense to try to do that. And so I think that's something that would be a good priority personally. I think statewide, that's a good priority to have. Their educational savings accounts, that's not gonna go back, but maybe making it so, there's similar requirements when you get the state funding as what we have in how to use it and things like that, or even just, having to accept everybody. So that's something that I personally would put forth as a possible priority. But that's across the board. Teacher development and retention is a good one just because of the retention piece. I think we're starting to see that now in district with our ag position. We're not the only ones. I was actually approached by another superintendent who's in the same boat. They don't have an ag teacher and they have no applicants as well. I will tell you from what I did just last year at Spencer, when our FCS teacher had retired when I was a principal, there were 37 openings at the time I had looked with 5 possible applicants for FCS teaching. And so if they gave us more options or flexibility for that, I think they are working really hard at that. I want to emphasize, like in talking with legislatures, I do feel they hear me really well and they've listened extremely well in that sense as well. And so I know they're working at it, but also having that as a focus will then have ISB looking at other possible things to suggest to them. Because they might not know possible, they're more than willing to look at that, but they don't necessarily know what's the best way to approach it. So if that's a priority for them, then they can suggest things to our legislatures who then can pass them in that sense. So I do think that's a good option as well. Supplemental state aid is always a good option because quite frankly with inflation, trying to at least just keep up with inflation is big in that sense. And then teacher recruitment follows in that same idea of teacher retention. But all 10 of those I think would be valid for Alburnett from my knowledge of the district so far and where we're at with things.
And the first 4 you say were the ones we had last year?
First 4 were the ones we had last year, which was supplemental state aid, teacher recruitment and licensure, local accountability and decision making, and mental health. which are definitely very valid across the board as well, so those would be possible ones to keep. I would recommend looking at specifically the 10 I recommend instead of the 22 that were also linked on there.
But we can only
We can submit 4. And so I just wanted to, in essence, know which 4 you'd like to submit, to kind of hit close to home.
Were there any from the list from last year that you felt like got discussed that were kind of resolved? Or at least got made good headway on?
We, on the same token, I do think they made some steps in all of them. I think all 4 of them would be fine to keep, to be honest, because all 4 of them are still highly needed. Mental health is a big issue for kids in high school especially, but even all the way down to elementary anymore now. I do think that I think statewide we've lost more local accountability or local decision-making in the school board sense. So that's always a good thing to put back out there. Supplemental state aid. So 15 years ago, you could get supplemental state aid in the teen percentages. And over the last probably decade, there's only been maybe two years where it's been over 2.5%. So that's one that I think should stay, for sure. So, I think all 4 of them would be fine.
What would be a good number?
Just even with inflation would be a great number.
Anything would be great.
Anything. So, yeah, so our highest actually that we got in the last 10 years has been this recent one, which was just around 3, and so getting it more to back a decade ago even would be nice. But just even a little higher would be nice, because it doesn't, usually what we're finding is that the amount that you wanna, the cost of living that you'd like to give your staff is more than what your supplemental state aid increase is. And so that's usually a challenge when you're talking about retaining teachers, when you can't keep up with the cost of living and pay.
And when that's 80% of your budget, you can't keep up as a district if we're not getting SSA.
So,
those top 4, it's hard to see which one to remove, but I do like that.
and you can keep, I mean,
I do like that private school choice one too, just from that standpoint of trying to even the playing field a little bit too.
yep.
I'd kinda like to see that voucher thing play out a year to see how that really impacts public versus private. And when I was looking at the list, I looked over the list, I didn't see anything that jumped out. And yeah, I hate to, just stay status quo, but I didn't see anything that jumped out that would take precedence over the 4 that we already have. I'm willing to talk, about any other options for sure, but when I looked over them, I just didn't see anything that jumped out. But
Yeah, I would agree too. I think those 4 that we have there, it's pretty tough to remove any one of them.
for our district anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Sounds good. I think, all 10 of those I would have been happy with any of them, because I think all of them are highly needed, so.
Yeah. Do we just
So you make a motion of which 4 and you could even just say in that sense the same 4 as last year, I think would be appropriate.
just
Because then it would be-
as a part of the conversation, do we know any of our numbers preliminary?
No, because we don't do officially the open enrollment until August
October.
1st. So we haven't even opened registration yet.
Oh,
I do want in the future to do that earlier. So what I would like to see next year is opening it up July 1st. And then making everything, including the payments, digital. Something we've seen, and this is a sidebar, so it's not on this topic, but something we've seen that in talking again with Harley and Teresa and such is we don't necessarily collect a lot of the fees as we should, because the fees are separate from when you register. And so, in order to do that, it actually makes it more beneficial to make it fully online. And then if we offered, what I would like to see in next, it's too rushed to do this, but next year's and offer some stations and some days where we have some staff available to help. If you struggle getting online or doing it digitally, we'll be available for these days or these times, please come in, we'll help you get your child registered, you can do everything online. So they can also do it then from the comfort of their own home, you know, put in a credit card versus trying to do it the other way. And most schools see a better return that way.
Sure.
So, talked to Brian and Josh about that. Not sure we'd be able to get it set up in time for this year by any means, but next year for sure, that'd be something we'll look at doing.
So we won't really have even any inkling of numbers until after August.
You can guess, you can guess, but I don't like to set that out there until after registration, because you never know fully until,
Sure.
and I don't think Alburnett suffers from the same transient issue that a lot of other districts did, but I know in Spencer, there's lots of transient students in the sense that, you know, you'd have fluctuation of 35 kids, so you might have started the year at 715 and you end the year at 765 or 735, it got up to 765 at some point because of constant in and out. And so, it's just been my habit not until we actually have them in the system.
That makes sense.
So,
Okay.
Got something in the way, I can't-
You've been doing so good with those motions.
Yeah, I
Keep
know.
on going.
but you only have two people who make.
Oh, you gotta refresh. And then it goes away.
All right.
And so when you tap on it, you gotta hit the top headline. I've done that before too, but I like how.
All right, I'll make a motion to approve the IASB legislative priorities. Same as last year.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the IASB legislative priorities similar to last year. Any further discussion? No further discussion, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor, signify by aye.
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 Mason?
Signify by aye.
Yep, aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. OPN Architects, contract extension.
So, we're past the date where they would have been contracted for in that sense, and so we would like to extend that. I personally would very much. My background is now in the construction, and also my experience in that sense was more on the academic side, professional development side. So I feel like I'm getting a very good piece, but I also don't want anything to not be great by the time this project is done. And so OPN, particularly Chad, has been extremely helpful in helping me devise ways to put a little bit more pressure on getting this stuff accomplished. And so I've been grateful. Again, their contract is past the point, I mean, they're in their red area there for working on it, and I would like to do this extended contract in order to keep their services throughout the end of it. So then that way I can make sure that we get everything to where it should be to represent Alburnett schools when it comes to the auditorium, making sure there's nothing missed on the punch list, things along those lines. You know, I obviously do my best, but I also don't always know what I'd be looking for in some of those. And I think, again, Chad has really gone above and beyond. He's started to sit in on some of the subcontractor meetings and things like that as well to help facilitate that and move it forward. And he's always available when I've been calling and asking for clarification. If I need something that I'm like, hey, can you really go focus on this with them and get them working on this part? He's been great with that. So,
Can I add on to
you
that?
can, please,
So to
that'd be great.
add on to that, on the financial side of this is obviously something that wasn't in our budget for our capital projects fund. But in looking at it, there's two things that I've been thinking about is, the first one is the contingency we held back for change orders. We are doing extremely well on that, and with Will going to the meetings, there's nothing that they're talking about that's gonna come up that's significant that will eat into that, and that contingency, if it's not used, goes back into our fund. Or it is there, but it'll then remain ours.
Back into the general fund?
Nope, stays in the capital projects
Oh.
fund, but it just isn't used on the project. like-
Unspent money for the project.
Exactly. On top of that, we had, back in the beginning when we got the funds, worked with Farmers State Bank to secure a pretty good money market rate. And we've been seeing significant, money back in interest. That was not something that we had accounted for, obviously, to spend on the project. So those are the two places that I see this coming from, and it's not going to eat up all of those by any means. So, I just want you guys to feel confident that although this isn't something we anticipated, it's something we can definitely afford.
Would we need
So,
to
Paul,
tap
did
in?
you have that we had a conversation about this before, obviously, but did you get an opportunity to speak with council and?
I did not, because if, on the off chance we didn't end up going, and here was the reason why. On the off chance we didn't end up going with Allers and Cooney, I didn't wanna start that process without that. But I am gonna be talking to them, I scheduled, sent an email to go out tonight that I could then go cancel if need be. So, I did schedule send that.
So can we approve this despite not knowing exactly where those funds may come from?
Jason, regardless, they're gonna come from our capital projects. I'm just, I guess, saying that that there is funding there for this. Does that make sense?
So I like that. I like the idea of using it as a contingency, because it is a contingency. It's just a very odd one, right? I mean, it's an added expense that we didn't see coming, but that's not really what those are built in for. That's why I would like to find out if that's actually legal, that we can even use those funds to do so.
So it is
Go ahead.
it is 100% legal to use the funds, to pay our architect. This is no different than the actual fees that we're already paying them. And we're paying that out of capital projects.
Okay. The other point, I think us as a board, you will going forward, this is a huge learning curve for us that going forward. And I can't believe it's not in the fine print of our contract with OPN anyway, that it doesn't specify that they're engaged throughout the completion of the project. So going forward, as a board, as a team, that we kind of need to make sure that that's written into OPN or whoever our next architect firm that we go with on our next big project would be. Hindsight's always 20/20, of course, but going forward, let's make sure that's in that fine print.
You mean something in there saying that they have to continue to be part of the project, even if it goes longer than anticipated,
Yeah,
without having to pay them anything more?
without having to pay them extra.
We got into the same situation kind of when we had to go back out for rebid. Do you recall that?
Yeah.
And they had to put on an additional amount on our contract.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think, there might be more leverage to go back to Apex for this money rather than having it all come out of our, because it was their shortcomings that made this project extend to where it's at now.
I think that's the conversation you're gonna have, isn't it?
That's what Jason wanted me to do once we have pointed legal.
Yeah.
So, I would reach out to them actually with that
We're
schedule.
on the same page with that, Tom, for sure.
Yeah.
Will we need to, probably tap into both funds, kind of like the
No.
contingency or is it one or the other?
So the way this is written is a maximum, I think, what say 11,000?
11,000 per month, but
And
that-
if you.
go ahead.
I mean, max, we're thinking, July, August, September, October, maybe, that's 44. That's way less. We have received way more interest than that. And so our interest alone would cover it, but I do anticipate some of that 5% contingency coming back as well, so.
So contingency wise, where are we?
I can tell you.
Have a roundabout, it doesn't have to be exact.
just to add on to that real quick, we don't, that 11,000 is the max because that's the punch list month. And so the other months, it looks like, our billing from it was maybe like 7,000.
Yeah.
It'd be like a 6,000 kind of range. And so,
So do we need to bring OPN back, like, get them current? Because, we're way past
we're
where
not.
they said they thought they were
I
already
don't
done.
I mean, as a board, you can discuss that, but they've kind of ate that
They-
already.
Yes.
Okay, and they're just saying, moving forward,
Yeah.
we need this.
Yes. They ate that cost because they wanted to try to help get the project done too. And Apex initially said they had promised Danny before I got here that they were gonna be done July 1st.
Right.
Which they didn't follow. So that was where OPM said, you know, we could eat that to July first to try to help get the project done. At which point though, now it's past July first and.
And they probably went from December to July already, right?
I think they
Wasn't there
also,
a
they
contract?
have they have a cushion built in there anyways, I think, so I don't think it started from December, but I do believe it's, I can't
I think
remember.
our contract was
I
December.
mean, you could say yes, December to now, they have not been paid any extra, because they anticipated it being done in December as well.
Right.
It's true.
So to give you a little context on the interest earned, we to date earned $110,000 in interest. It was not in our budget, it's additional money. And then, on our contingency, we've only used 63% of what we said we would for change orders. That leaves $242,000. Now, this is all money that's in capital projects, so it's not money that can be used on general fund stuff. This is money that might be sitting there at the end of this project that we can continue to purchase things and use on the project. So, that
And
makes
there
sense?
will, I mean, I'll preemptively tell you, we're probably gonna need to add some sound, what is it, sound,
Some deadening stuff or?
acoustic type
It's
panel.
like an acoustic shell.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
So we're probably gonna
Some
need
beats.
to, yeah, we're probably gonna need to add that in the auditorium area, which I don't know what that would be. I'll work on that with OPM, but that's gonna be something we would need to take out of.
Is
Well,
that
you
something
could-
that we need to get figured out before they start installing chairs?
It's on the stage, I think.
Yep, so that
Oh,
shouldn't,
so it's
that
not- it's
should
actually
not
not
affect.
above the seating
No,
area?
it's a shell on the stage.
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
And if
okay.
you recall, it was in our initial bids, but then when we rebid, you guys took out, items like the scoreboards, the shell, as alternatives, do you remember that? And then we
Mhm.
came in, closed the budget, and then, so anyways, it was a part of the project to begin with. It was something that was taken out to pretty much be used for this.
And you
So we
can,
wanna
you
add
can
that.
eventually, yeah, I
It's
would,
just kind of always been there for me.
You add it back in, you add it back in with OPM's involvement, or is it
we
more
would
cost
probably do it
effective?
with OPM's involvement since we're already gonna be dealing with that in this sense, but it was something where we did wanna wait till towards the end to make sure there's no other contingencies that come up
I got you.
beforehand, but it would be something that, cause otherwise, I mean, you can put this kind of thing, but it doesn't give you the same quality, and if you're gonna go for a great auditorium, you should do it right,
Right.
instead of trying to patchwork.
Well, I was just curious, my question was more to, would it be more cost effective to do it
Oh, gotcha.
after the fact?
So we'll have to look at how much it could cost, because there are obligations to, the cost will drive what we have to do for quotes or actually going out for bid and things like that. So this might be something that would require us to have an architect. But we're not sure, we don't know what those costs are.
We don't, haven't looked at it, I just figured if we're getting on that, I just wanted to make sure, so then there wasn't the idea, cause I wanted to kind of keep it with the project possible.
Well, and I know some of the reason we asked that is I know when it comes to a furniture thing, you know, a lot of times, you know, whoever's involved will do that separate from the architect, so there isn't a big chunk of the change that goes to the architect too, for buying furniture that you can get yourself.
Right.
So I don't know if that's the same as like acoustic panels, if you get a little more bang for your buck, doing that separate from the architect.
I don't know that one yet, but we will find out.
Okay.
But it'll come later as we get closer to the end of the project.
Or even difficult with installation, if it's easier to do it now when you have the equipment. Maybe it would be cheaper to do it.
True.
Does OPM have I know they've got a, do not to exceed per month, but do they have a not to exceed timeline?
The contract is only for a certain amount of.
Yep, I asked them to put it only for so many months. And I gotta double check what that was. Yeah.
Starting July 1st, but then.
Oh, they did actually,
They must have just left it open-ended, huh?
they did leave it.
It says until project is complete.
Yeah.
I mean,
Until project is complete.
Well, that was mine, because I had asked them to put in there to do like a 3-month period.
Well, I think it's probably not really that big a good way until project's complete.
I don't, yeah, I was gonna say, because the piece was, is I do think we need them either way. I
Right.
do. The reason I had asked them to put in a set time frame was because then I was gonna go back to Apex and use that as a pressure point. That was why. So, but. It was.
Nobody in here wants this drug out any longer than it has to be.
No.
So it's not like somebody's gonna, it's not like OPN is gonna purposefully
Yeah.
take this out 6 more months just to
Mhm.
suck more money out of us.
OPM, they're behind in their other projects now
Yeah.
because of this, very far behind. So they wanted to get their staff over to those, but wanted to make sure this gets done as well. I'm talking to Roger.
Gotcha.
So I'm sure even if we were in September and ready for the project to be, or you feel like comfortable, I can handle it from here, we can still tell you.
We
You can
could.
tell that, May, I think we're good.
I think so. And what I might do is, we can get an addendum too, that we'll just approve for, because I'm sure that you can add the addendum afterwards, but we'll have to have them sign it separately
Yeah.
as well. So I'll
Okay.
talk to them about doing that too.
Because to you, what does it look like to have, not have to need OPN?
I mean, I'm gonna tell you that I would like them helping with the punch list.
Okay.
I would like them helping with, I mean, I would particularly like Chad helping with the punch list.
Mhm.
Because I remember asking
Yeah,
Chad,
for sure. We don't wanna put that punch list on your shoulders.
Yeah.
That's way too much of a burden. They
I-
know what they're looking for. They've done this.
yeah, because I had asked Chad one time about
Yeah.
like how long like the punch list phase is. And I said, is it 30 days? Oh, it's probably like 60.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, we're not even done yet, and he's talking about adding another 60 days.
Yeah.
I
And,
mean, punch list, so
Yeah.
I mean, that's at least 3 months, if not 4.
yeah, and we were kind of figuring about 4,
Okay.
is when we initially talked 3 to 4 months, is what we
The
were
con,
thinking.
the contract says it's an hourly rate
Yeah,
for the labor, not to exceed 11,000 per month. So
plus expenses.
chances are we probably won't get that 11,000 per month. It's just an hourly rate, so I'm assuming we pay when he comes out,
Yep.
you know.
And if he has any paperwork he has to do at the office.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You probably fuel expense, I'm sure they probably put that in there, you know. But I can't imagine that we'd even hit that 11,000 per month,
Right.
number. It's just not to exceed 11,000.
Correct.
I'll make a motion to approve OPN Architects contract extension until the project is completed.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve Opian Architects contract extension until the project's completed. Any further discussion? No further discussion, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor signify by aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. 3DE MOU.
And we actually do have Christine Lee here, in case we have any questions as well, who is our JA partner in this, Junior Achievement. And it is awesome that we were able to get to this, so they've been great in working with us in order to make this kind of an affordable piece for Alburnett, so we can offer 3DE at the high school. So what you'll see there is the original agreement is still in there, as is when we originally wrote it, with the addition of the addendum. And so then the addendum that you can pull up is the change in the cost. And I'm just gonna pull that up so I can share that real fast. Oh, here. There we go. And so then it's the 5-year agreement, and thank you for actually, do you wanna speak to this at all, Christine?
I certainly can. In looking at the model of 3DE, it is predicated on 600 students participating when fully executed after the first 4 years. And 3DE charges a licensing fee of $250,000 per year per school for 600 students, or a cohort model that could be up to 600 students. And working through this for the very first time, we're learning about this journey as right alongside Alburnett and college community schools, and really wanted to move forward with 3DE. And we kind of paused with Alburnett because of the cost structure. Our students, all in, would be half of that at 300, fully maxed, with our student cap and our student body. And so we got to looking at really scalability and equity. How can we make this an equalized playing field regardless of size or geography so that all students can access 3DE? And how can we kind of level that field with metro and rural and small and large? And so we really tried to think with your interests in mind how to justify a cost structure that not only seems reasonable to partner with, but also sustainable in your academic budget. And we know things are very tight, but what we came to is a conclusion of, if you take the 600 students and the $250,000, it's about an annualized $450 per student fee. And so what we did is we looked at ways to optimize that same fee structure and parlay that here with a student body of 300, and it's about $135,000. So regardless of where you would go to access 3DE in Lynn County, or in eastern Iowa for that matter, the shared cost structure is going to be the same regardless of school. We really felt that this was an opportunity for us to take a step back and really analyze the equity of that, the inclusional nature, and when we look at the diversity among all of our districts, it seemed like where we could land and really feel good about it in partnership with all of our districts, no matter what their scale and scope. So that's kind of how we came to the $135,000. You may ask, it's still gonna cost $250,000. So we as an organization, Junior Achievement of Eastern Iowa, are gonna bear the rest of that fee structure. And we will go to the marketplace and raise that privately through grants and proposals and through individual and corporate donations. So that obligation we're gonna take on for Alburnett to ensure that we can continue to move forward in partnership.
And I want to just formally thank you guys again for doing that. It's been a great experience working with you guys.
Well, and
I'm just gonna
thank
say
you.
that.
Thank you, it's been
So-
great working with you and Harley and working through that. And Danny was a part of that conversation as well. It's nice to be able to be back on solid footing and with a proposal that I think truly represents the partnership we all intended from the beginning. And certainly something that we can both grow with, so.
Well, I'm sure I speak for everyone up here when I say it was kind of a bummer when we heard that it was not gonna happen because of financial situation.
Right.
You know? And that was one of the pieces that we spoke about, or I know that I
Right.
had questions about is, you know, it's with those fees, it's more or less unattainable for a rural district. You know, and so we were like, gosh, is there any way that we could do this where we're more of a proportional, you know, exactly like.
Exactly.
So I'm glad that that's how it came about, so.
Well, and truly, that's how we look at our other MOAs. It's a per pupil fee, and that way, it's very equitable regardless of scale and scope.
Sure.
And so I feel really proud that we got to that conclusion. I know Director Martin had the same concerns. I'm sure Director Krickenberg did too. It was a concern of ours, and we certainly don't. The intention of 3D has never been to burden anyone. It's truly to create an opportunity for students to learn in a very progressive and thoughtful way and prepare them for their futures. So,
And not just students in a large school.
correct. It's not just for some kids. It's for every kid, and I think this cost model affords us that opportunity.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your efforts.
Well, we're very proud to partner with Alburnett and going forward to be a model across the state. We will be first in the state, along with college community schools, in year one of 2024. Subsequent schools have now signed MOAs across the state, specifically 3 in Polk County that will come online the following year, but none that will exceed A for first. Alburnett.
Right. That's
The
awesome.
first will be Alburnett.
Oh,
So,
That's awesome.
yep.
We're glad to be part of it.
That's really great news. Achievement's obligation stretch into the future?
Well, we're making a 5-year commitment, Director Martin, that we will annually raise that subsidy. Going forward, our marketing efforts have already begun to expand 3DE, and as expansion happens, that 250 will graduate down, and proportionately, those cost savings will be afforded to both school and junior achievement. And so, for example, the Tampa Bay area has north of 14 schools, and their per school fee is below $200 a year. And so as we continue to expand, our obligation will shift some and become more affordable per pupil, and we'll pass those savings along.
So we,
Awesome,
so
thank
we would see that on like years to come's invoices.
Yes,
It
yes,
might not-
and-
It will be not to exceed that amount essentially.
This is the max.
So you
Correct.
anticipate it coming down even?
I do. We've had a lot of interest already. The traction will be something that we'll take on this year. And the work, obviously, will provide some clarity. But early indications, there's a lot of interest. The Iowa Workforce Development Agency is now very aware of 3DE, and had a very long web call last week with some of those key decision makers, and Director Townsend's very excited about what this could do for Iowa students. So more to
Cool.
come, and Mr. Dybel has already offered, as did Dr. Trimble, you know, we're gonna start looking at legislative advocacy that we can rely upon our superintendents to really help anchor that voice and the benefits to kids, and maybe we can do something transformative across the entire state. So we'll be the pilot, and everyone will be looking to us for that lead, and I think we're gonna learn a lot over this year. Final say is that we've restructured our entire team and dedicated one of my staff members and pulled them out of our rank and file to dedicate directly for supporting this instructional model this coming year, and all of the curricular writing and mapping that will happen between the two school districts, along with the hiring of subsequent staff that will be embedded in both, and also supporting my colleague in between. And so there'll be 4 people by the end of this year that will be anchoring both schools, but one will remain fully on our payroll, and we've been able to anchor some funding to already pay for that overhead, so now we're gonna start chipping away on the gap for Alburnett.
So
So really positive.
In years to come, the savings that we could potentially, could see, is that based on just Iowa schools? Because you said like,
Yes,
like
it would be within
Georgia has,
our purview.
yeah, okay, all right.
Licensing under Junior Achievement of Eastern Iowa, but please
Okay.
please be mindful that that includes the MSAs of Iowa City, Cedar Rapids, the entire Cedar Valley, Mason City, Clear Lake, and all of the rural territory in between. So every school coming on adds to that economy of scale.
Okay, all right. So it's not like a nationwide
No.
savings?
No, it
it's-
would just
it's very
be under
local.
our operating jurisdiction.
Right.
So, as you can see with that, and again, thank you very much. for
My
this.
pleasure.
It is, it's
Happy to
It's a
answer.
wonderful opportunity, and with us, you know, obviously our focus first and foremost is on kids. And so with that being our focus, this is a great opportunity for them. And I think that's, and making it equitable for us as a rural district to be able to do through Junior Achievement Partnership. It's a great thing, and I think, you know, that recommendation is that we would approve it and move forward for the next 5 years with it.
Just one more quick question, is this more in line from what a budget standpoint, what you were kind of earmarking for the?
Yeah, so between some changes in personnel, and different categoricals that can be used to fund this, the 135 is absolutely attainable in our district's budget.
Is it more than what we were aiming for, like for Iowa Big? Something like that?
Yes, yep,
By
yeah.
quite a bit, or?
So the Iowa Big program itself, over the last couple of years, the cost has went down, so that's hard to answer. I guess right now, absolutely it's more. But like I said, between the staff changes that we had at Iowa Big, and then, with some categoricals, it's gonna fit just fine in the budget.
I remember 100,000 at one point for Iowa Big when we
The
first started.
first couple of years, yeah, but it's nothing like that now.
Is that just the same scenario, like it was adopted by more school districts, and so then it becomes more affordable for everybody?
Yeah, I
Is
think
that the
high
same
level,
concept?
what I can say with Iowa Big is that we were using a lot of, Iowa Big's, people and resources at the beginning of it, and then over time, our staff internally took on that work. And then with the sharing at Springville, that recouped some of the funding as well. So, over time, it just became more sustainable, Iowa Big did, and this is just the next version of that.
And one thing to note too is that this will actually end up affecting all of the students, since it would include all of the high school when the model is more fully implemented. And so,
Instead of just 20
instead
or
of,
10.
instead of
whatever
just
our
the
seats are.
numerical, like, and I don't know what ours was in years past, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. But I do know that all told, you'll end up hitting more kids.
Right.
And so that also would be a factor in looking at cost, because you'll effectively get every single student the experience in the high school, which is an end goal. I mean, that was an end goal of Iowa Big, and it should be, because that's the end goal of this is, as Brian put it, 3DE was Iowa Big on steroids, is what he explained it to me as initially, it was his first phrase, so, so I think that also plays a factor in the cost.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I'd like to take a minute here to thank Christine, and the junior achievement for, coming through, with that obligation. You know, when we were trying to recruit the superintendent here, and selling our district to Will, to get him to come here, Iowa Big, 3ED was a huge selling point for us. And it would have been a real disappointment to start off on that foot where, oh yeah, we're just kidding about 3D. If you put us in a position now, we can kind of fulfill that promise to not only our kids in our district, but also Will coming here. So I can't thank you enough, Christine. I wish I was there in person to give you a big high five or maybe even a hug, but.
I'll take a rain check. Well, it truly is our pleasure. We've been proud to partner with the district for a long number of years in a multitude of ways, and those commitments will remain, and we'll just enhance these further offerings, and other assets that we're bringing online will be then afforded to the district, and it ultimately is the goal. We share the same purpose, the same vision, and we're just trying to help get to the finish line together. So we're going to learn a lot this coming year, but I would agree. I've never been in the business of discounting another third-party service or another curriculum or experience. But what I do know about 3DE is it's for every student at their learning ability, regardless of any backgrounds or interests or whatever their future may look like. It's a very inclusive and accessible instructional model that remains on campus, embedded in classrooms where your best teachers are doing their best work with kids. And that's what I think is our differentiator. There are a lot of side benefits to that. So I'm excited to see it have some traction. And for those of you who have 7th graders that just finished that grade, boy, those kiddos will be founders in 9th grade, and that's going to be a game changer.
Any further discussion? I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the 3D MOU. Do I need to-
I'll second that motion.
Do I need to include the addendum
As
Yeah.
presented.
as presented? Okay.
It's been moved and seconded to, for the 3D EMOU, Any further discussion? No further discussion, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Student handbook.
So I linked the document with the changes. One thing I did, well, there's a couple things I wanted to point out. First off, House File 604 was passed, and that does require a student discipline policy that has basically progressive levels of discipline for repeat offenses. In addition to, it requires some certain suspensions within there. What I will tell you is there's not the guidance from the DE yet. They were supposed to have that sooner. That's not out yet. And so for the full revision of adding that student discipline policy in, I'd like to kind of, what I did is I put in a suspension piece in there right now. It's kind of a temporary holdover. And then I would like to add in that actual discipline like template, just slightly revised for Alburnett after the Department of Education releases it. And so if you open it, you're going to see at the beginning that I did put on there that this has, and it was after the table of contents, so I'll tell you what page it was actually on. There's a notice at the beginning, it would have been on page 6 in the handbook. And I'll actually switch this to the cast up here so then that way people can see that as well. It is going to be updated after guidance is provided from the Department of Ed, and when that updated student discipline policy is in place, we'll resend the handbook to all students and parents. And so it's one of those things where we do need to make a change to it afterwards, which is not common, because normally you just want to do your changes in the spring, so you have plenty of time, but you need to have a handbook out that's board approved when you have student registration. So we need a handbook that's board approved for student registration, but then we're going to need to update it after we get guidance from the DE. There's also a policy that I'm going to be presenting to you next month that we'll need to adopt from House File 604 about student discipline. And so I'll make sure that's on the agenda, but both of those things, the one for the handbook specifically, I would like to get the guidance from the Department of Education before implementing that officially. And I kind of put in a couple pieces that I think should tide it over per se until we get that in there. And you can see that at the very bottom is where I added the suspension piece, just so then that under the very bottom of the handbook, kind of towards the end, under suspensions. So then that way we can keep it.
What page is that
Oh gosh, let me tell you.
on?
50, last one. All in.
Oh,
And so it's just really what it is the placeholder until we actually get the student discipline policy in there. So we'll remove that and implement whatever the student discipline policy template is with some revisions based on Alburnett. One thing we'll probably look into, because it's something that's required in there, multiple offenders will be given somehow direction or access to counseling, and which is actually an agreement that Dr. Trimble had already entered with Grant Wood AEA for this upcoming year. There's like a shared counsel finding mental health service, and so we'll be signing that agreement officially again because she agreed to it before, but that'll actually fit in with the discipline policy. And it'll likely, we're gonna probably need to find some kind of also alternative reteaching. So we might look at maybe some kind of like online course or thing that we would add in as part of the steps in that policy. Like I said though, whenever the Department of Ed is gonna give you guidance, it's good to wait for that and then add it in. And they do say it's gonna be a template, so we would need to revise it and then we take a deep look at it in that sense, but it's good to follow that because they're gonna obviously be following the letter of the law in their template. And so, so like right now what I'm saying is that's basically a placeholder. The other changes are what the principals had already put in from before, and they should be highlighted in a different color as well when you look throughout the document. But there's not a lot of big changes.
I see the one about riding the bus and.
The riding the bus ones, there's an incident where a parent was upset and went on the bus and was kind of threatening towards the bus driver. And so that one is just, you should not be getting onto the bus when there's students on there in order to make sure Was it not him?
Like that for
And
the
so
record,
that
it
one
was
was
not
on
me.
there, that was a request to Bob, Edie, because the issue is, you know, they should be going to talk to somebody else about it, not going and, especially when the bus driver has a bus full of kids. Going on there, that's a danger to the kids as well as the staff member. And so they should, be approaching the principal or somebody else about the issue that they had. And definitely, it's not safe to go on there when there's a bus full of kids to address whatever they thought was wrong. And so that was added in there because of that incident. And so that I'd like to keep, of course, on there anyways. Other things are more based on like attendance, requirements for concurrent credits, things along those lines. And so, you can see the changes in the different colors, as well as if there were crossed out things that are no longer in there. And again, this is gonna come back to you all once that guidance, from the Department of Education comes. That is supposed to be coming. They also have a lot of tasks to do and not necessarily enough staff to always get it done, so like, and it's not, I've worked with them, they're always great to work with, but they have a lot of things on their plate, and so I can completely understand that it's not quite ready yet. Especially because if you get all these things by July 1st, and there's supposed to be DE guidance, where they've got about 6 or 7 things they're trying to create guidance for that just finished about a month or two ago and don't have enough staff to approach it, so. They're always very helpful, but it takes a bit. So.
I'll make a motion to approve the student handbook as presented.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the student handbook. Any further discussion? No further discussion, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor signify by aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Board policies for review, first reading.
One thing I just wanted to add, there was a second part under the handbook there, and it wasn't, it was just that we would like to utilize this year to perform a review of the code of conduct as well, just to kind of update it. And so I did want to recommend utilizing the SIAC committee. That's really what they're there for. That's a committee made of parents, students, and staff, and that's their purpose, is to review that. And then it should be led, in my mind, by our high school administration, which would be Brian and Nick. I'm gonna be there for support in that sense, and then possibly if a board member wanted to be involved in that as well, that could happen as well. And I think that that would be something that, you know, if you wanna do a really thorough review, it should take, like, you should take the whole time to utilize it, like, go throughout the year, do a couple meetings spread out, and basically kind of look at other code of conducts from across the district or state piece there. And so, you know, we, in that sense, we keep the code of conduct as it is for now, but then have a revised code of conduct to present to you sometime in the spring, probably when we redid the handbooks as well and really go through it. And so, again, and it's not bad, realistically, like, it's good to do periodic reviews of different things every so many years anyway, so. If that one is one, I probably didn't necessarily need a recommendation in that sense to do it, but I think it'd be good anyways for the board to approve that process.
So should we need to approve that piece?
I think it'd be good to just, I mean, I don't think I need it, I'll be honest, that I don't think I would need it to do it, or I really wouldn't, but I do know that, you know, particularly because of situations or other things, I think it'd be good to have the board officially, like, make a motion to do that review.
Yeah, for sure, and I think we talked about this a little bit too.
Mhm.
I mean, we definitely want to make sure that we're in line with what we're doing there as far as the code of conduct. And right now, I think it's very important. That was one of the things that we kind of put off for you to get your will, so that we could discuss that, review that. So I think that's good start to get that moving. I'd like to see it done before it's the spring.
Well, we could, I just don't wanna set expectations and say we will for sure get it done before, cause usually a review takes a full year of like.
We've grown used to that now with Apex, they've conditioned us. That's awesome.
Hey,
No, I think that's gonna be a great
Okay.
idea to get that going, because we do, that was one of the big things that's on our list for you to accomplish, for sure.
perfect.
How do you want to word that?
So, what I would just say is make a motion to, use SIAC,
This year.
high school administration, and then actually, the only other question would be is if we could assign a board member, and you don't have to, like I said, I know that the schedules might not always align, but on the same token, so that there'd be one that, if you would like to have a board member present, you kind of pre-assign that this board member would be the person. That would be nice. And so, if you guys could, that's probably more where the motion would come in. So a discussion on which board member would be involved.
And
Can we have,
you can do 2, yes.
Yes,
Or you can't do
you
3.
can't do 3, any more than 2, and it's an official board meeting.
can we word that as up to 2 board members?
Yeah, and I would actually prefer names, if we could, unless you guys wanted to rotate for some reason.
No, just in the spirit of the conversations we've had in the past,
Mhm.
some committees that we want to build together. I just don't want to get the cart ahead of the horse. Yeah, we can end out some names for this right now, I guess. Well, the other thing is, we have an election coming up here, so these names could potentially change.
Okay. Well, I mean, we could do that. I think we'll just need to make sure we're very conscientious and aware of
Reappoint
who's
someone else.
coming, so that we don't end up with 3 or, you know, so that's why I think the appointing would be nice, because then it's like, I just know I'll reach out each time to these 2 people and see if they can, and give them the invites to the meeting to review, et cetera. And then if we wanted to, after the election, look at that and like reappoint, we could absolutely do that too.
Okay, that's fine, as long as we're aware that those names can change. Yeah, and I can be one of those names unless Tom or Jeremiah, wanna do that, but my name can certainly be part of that, whatever you guys wanna do.
I think,
I'd like to be a part of it as well, so.
Perfect.
So
So then you'd make the
Just-
motion with those, so to review it, including the SIAC committee, Brian, Nick, myself, you, and Jason.
Okay. All right, I'll make a motion to utilize this year to perform a review of code, for the code of conduct, using the SIAC committee, as well as Jason Martin and Jeremiah Krukenberg as members, or board members,
And administration.
and the administration, high school administration.
Thank you, I'm sorry. I'll work on getting these recommendations to a very short sentence from now on, like, I'll fix that. Sorry.
We'll go through
We'll
it.
talk, I guess.
Yes.
I know if we need to.
She can help me. I'm relying heavily on Harley for all these things. Thank you.
It's been moved. Do I have a second?
Yeah, I'll second the motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, that we utilize this year to perform a review of the code of conduct. And, recommended members of the review team, will be the Alburnett School Improvement Advisory Committee, the SIAC Committee, Brian Mortz, Nick Woolridge, Will Dibble, Jeremiah Krukenberg, and Jason Martin. Any further discussion? No further discussion, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor signify by aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Now we'll move on to item J, board policies for review, first reading.
So, according to our board policy 209.6, we have to review the policy once every 5 years. It also requires a first reading and then follow-up for the revision. So, You might have done a first reading, but I'm redoing that just because I wasn't there for the first reading, if you did that. And so again, our policy does allow for exception if we need a quick turnaround, but it's only for exceptions, so we'll still follow that. Today's only gonna be a first reading to review them realistically, bring them to your attention, and then we would look at revisions next month. So, and then that's also where I give you maybe recommendations and things along those lines. You can just briefly open them if you wanted, but it's student complaints and grievances is 502.4. 503.1 is student conduct. 503.4 is good conduct rule, and then the 104 is the legal status of the school district.
So this is the student conduct policy that we're talking about using.
Yeah, and so, well, so the policy, and this is something that I like to preface, is, it's not that we can't ever change, but I don't like to veer too far from IASB because they have lawyers that spend a lot of time reviewing the policy to make sure it follows all laws, and they update it based on new legislation, and it's not something that we're necessarily as equipped to do. But then it's really what it comes down to is that's the overarching one. When you wanna do more fine tuning, that's where it should come in the handbook and good conduct policy. So that's why we're doing the recommendation of the review of the good conduct policy for the year. Because truly, I think that what it should come down to is that that's where you're getting more of the fine tuning piece of how does it fit for Alburnett? And what should it look like in Alburnett? And so that's where I think it's better, to focus more on how we worded our good conduct policy, not so much the actual overarching policy that we get from IASB. That's usually, if you look at most legal challenges, that's usually when school districts lose, is when they don't use the given policy. And that's just very, and you can look at a lot of precedent, and that's very common. And so I would be very hesitant to make too many, not to say you can't make some changes, you absolutely can, but you wanna be very, very specific, and when it comes down to like, there's a specific thing or instances that are causing the issue, usually it's better resolved by the good conduct policy change versus changing the overarching policy. So that's where I think the review is probably gonna resolve most of where the issues came up versus changing this policy itself. That doesn't mean we're not gonna necessarily change it, you know, we remember the comments, we'll look at it, but, you know, it should be a very, very good, valid reason and, to do something like that, and, you know, that's where we would review it.
But any changes to these policies, would come between now and next month.
Yep, so this is when we do our first reading now, and then, any revisions or anything would be presented next month at the board meeting for approval. And then these wouldn't be up for review again for 5 years.
Okay.
Yep. You can always do them earlier, but they wouldn't be scheduled to be reviewed. So just an FYI too, when it says it's every 5 years, that's the recommendation, and you keep it in rotation so you don't have too many on there. There's never anything that stops you from reviewing them again later too, so it's not like you couldn't come back to it. But, that's only as needed. So there's not actually necessarily an action you need to take on it for the first reading.
You do.
Oh, yes, and you have to approve, yeah, so you have to approve that, but there's no changes we're making, I apologize.
Yeah, we're not
Thank
making
you.
changes tonight. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. What, but there are, these are changes from the original verbiage, or,
Yeah.
no?
No, so there's no changing on the verbiage right now, this is our current policy as written.
Okay.
This is what it currently is.
I think this is a change to what they're used to is what you, I think that's
Oh.
kind of what you're saying.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, I'm sorry.
usually when we would have a first reading, it would already have the
Oh,
recommended
gotcha,
changes
yeah.
on it.
So no, I guess, I'm sorry, I did not put any changes on there for the first reading, because, and now on the same token, I'm not recommending any changes right now either. So that would also be why there's no changes on there. So, let me clarify, I'm not, again, and I will be very honest, I am a new superintendent. I don't feel super comfortable changing, ISBA policy that has been reviewed by a large legal team right off the bat in my new job. So, to be very honest in that sense. I think that this is where my first reading comes in, is I think that we would do a good job looking at the actual policies in our handbooks that relate to this, and looking at changes there first. And then if after those changes are implemented, we still feel like there's a necessity to look at this again, we can come back to it. That's no question. If that's what the board would like to do, and I'm here to serve you, I'm here to serve the district, but I would also very much like to not make a large change in the very first month. That could be a bad choice.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
So I think this might help, is, policy is set at that board level, the handbook is also approved by the board, but the handbook has policies in it, but I think of those as procedures almost. So like he's saying, the code of conduct, which is in the handbook, will be reviewed, but it's more of a procedural thing, where the policy is written by IASB to cover us legally. Does that make
Correct.
sense?
And
So they're kind of two different things.
They are,
Really
but
good.
they work very hand in hand.
Yeah.
it's really, I think of it this way, when the legislation makes a law, it's very broad usually, and they have an intent behind it. But then it goes down, like if it's an education law, it goes to the Department of Education to fine tune it into administrative code. And that's in essence what we do at the handbook. So we make broad policy at the board, and then we fine tune it in the handbook of this is what it looks like. And I think what people have been talking to me about is more so, this is what it looks like, is where the question comes in. Not so much the overarching intent behind the policy, in that sense. And so I think like, they're talking about the actual procedure and dealing with it was more what they would like reviewed. Really, when it comes down to it, it's more the procedure, not so much that big policy. And I think that's the better way to do it anyways. And I could be wrong, it could be something where, it comes back to that, but again, and thank you for clarifying for me. Yeah, it's like, that's where I think that it's important to keep the letter of the legal code similar, and then go back to it.
Well, I think you find that a lot in policy, like you take, stepping away from the student discipline or anything like that, even when we talk about benefits, you guys have board policy that outlines what benefits we offer, like high level, but it doesn't say we offer $35,000 in life insurance, etc. That's in our staff handbook, our employee, that's kind of where like the level of detail comes in, so that's kind of the difference.
Yeah, and I think that when you've heard people talking about it, what they're really talking about is the detail piece in the code of conduct or within the handbook, things like that. From my understanding and talking to people.
I'll
Is
accept
there,
that.
is there any way, Will, that we could like have like a work session or something to review those, to look at those, and just really talk about what those are, what they mean?
Sure. I will, no,
For my cohorts there, I'm sure they don't want another meeting, I know you and Carly don't either, but, those are the policies that we identified as really being, really needing to be looked at. And I don't wanna really just hang this on you either, as a board, I wanna take that responsibility and review those thoroughly so that we know what we're signing up for. Does that make sense?
Yep, I will schedule a work session for, sometime in between now and the next board meeting. I will reach out to each of you individually to find some dates that work. And we'll schedule a work session.
Guys, am I alone in that, or?
No, I guess I wanna make sure we're going over these. I mean, I've read through them when the agenda was put out and stuff, but, I guess I want the feedback of the board too, just be able to bounce off, make sure everybody's thinking the same thing.
I would agree. I know that's kind of what we all discussed back when we had brought these kind of to the table, to do a kind of a deep dive on them and make sure that these policies reflect what we want them to reflect, for community and for our students. So I think that would be a good idea too. And I would even throw out there, I'd like to have, the principals involved in that, just so they can put their voices into it too. You know, one of the first questions I always ask them when the situation arises is, do you feel handcuffed by board policy? Because I don't want a principal to feel, I know sometimes it's nice to have that to look to, but at the same time, I want them to make sure that they have the opportunity to do what they need to do and not say, well, I would like to do that, but I can't because of this policy.
Yeah.
So, I wanna make sure that they feel like they have the tools necessary to do their job successfully and to a level that they feel is appropriate too.
Okay. I will figure out a work session, and then I will get in touch with each of the board members about the date of that work session.
So if that was to include them, would we have to wait until they
We
were
wanna do it
on
in August,
contract?
because their contracts are not, they're not supposed to be here in July.
Right.
Not to say they don't, because they work a lot, but, they're not supposed to. I want them to relax a little bit.
Right, and I would want that too.
Is that
Well,
something,
I mean,
is
can we
that
have this
something
work
you'd be
session?
okay with, Will, is having the other
Yeah.
administrators in there? or-
You know, I would like to, I'll for sure schedule the work session, if you don't mind, maybe, can I talk to them a little bit first about
Sure.
that? And just
Sure.
see, because I know they're also gonna be pretty swamped with what's coming up in July and wanting to plan for that. And so, maybe I'll just kind of reach out to them and see, because I think, I think it'd be okay for them to not be there on the same
Okay.
token, like I said, just because it's August. But if you really adamant that you'd like them there, we can. I will tell you in the future, I'd like to do board admin retreats periodically in the years. And so I think that we could address those in that time too, if you ever have questions or things along those lines. Because I'd like to do scheduled board administrative retreats. I think those are good things to do, or evenly maybe board leadership retreats with staff leadership. And that was something that is on my to-do list for later on in the year too. But either way, I'll make sure the work session comes, and we'll get that scheduled, and I will just, if I could get back to you about the administrators
problem.
being there, if that's okay?
Yeah, that's no problem.
Okay,
So do we need to let this die?
No, in the meantime, you can approve the first reading and then if there's changes after the first reading, it just goes to a second reading and it can still get approved at second reading.
Yep.
That is perfectly fine.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I didn't mean to surprise you.
no,
with that.
you're good.
Maybe I probably didn't represent as well as I should have when we spoke about these. I thought that that's what we were doing is gonna prove that you were going to do the first reading, and then there'd be further something.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, that's
So
totally
my
fine.
bad, not misunderstanding that.
You're
I
good.
thought that we could have that clarified before, but.
You're good. That is no problem. So we will get that all scheduled, and, like I said, I'll reach out to each individually so that I can find some possible dates to get that all done.
Okay.
And then I'll just need to give myself enough time to give notice that we're having a work session.
So a motion for board policies first reading?
Do we need to include the work session in that?
No, you don't have to take action to schedule.
Okay, alright. I'll take a motion to approve the board policies for review for the first reading.
I'll second that motion.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the listed board policies for review first reading. Any further discussion? No further discussion, then we'll proceed to vote. All in favor, signify by aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Alburnett additions and remodels, change order number 17.
This is just to approve, these are not originally in the plans. The big one is going to be the classroom duct liners, so in the band room, they added some duct liners because they were getting like echoing and the sound going through much more than expected. So they added all these duct liners that were not originally in the plans to reduce that noise transference. And so that's the big piece on there in the larger amount that you're gonna see there. And it also helps keep the acoustics appropriate in the classroom too, during the band and choir. So it's going in both the band room and the choir room ducts. That was not originally on the plans.
Who would have initiated that request?
It would have been, actually, I believe, OPN, probably. I can't remember who started that RFI. I'd have to go back and look, but, because I can't remember if Apex or OPN initially did that request.
Recommendation
Yeah,
or something? Okay.
Was submitted by Kyle, so maybe.
So it might have been Apex.
Okay.
So, and that was just something that was noticed as they were in there. And so, because it wasn't in the plans, so it's added in, and that's the larger expense.
Okay. Is it like a, some sort of acoustic sleeve that goes
So
over
yeah,
this?
it goes on the in, so these kinds of circular ducts that they have in there, it goes inside the whole duct.
Oh,
So-
it's inside, not outside. Okay.
That's what they were explaining it to me as.
After going through what we went through with this area, I think it's probably necessary.
Yeah, and
This is
this, you
decent.
guys generate way less noise than a.
Yeah, well, band room.
Yeah.
I mean, I can be loud, but we'll see.
These were done too, weren't they?
Yeah, and then these, there was they're not, actually not liners in there, they're more like,
Apple.
yeah, maybe that's the word there. It was described to me like they were like this in there, so that the sound protected, like,
Oh,
that makes sense?
to cut down the sound a little bit,
Yeah.
from traveling through the
But
ducts.
actually, that didn't work as well as these panels worked, much better,
Wow.
yeah.
And then the other one was just a small one. When they were doing the initial electrical boxes, they just adjusted it, which that was the cost of doing the adjustment. And there's some, and he explained this to me fairly well, and I'm sorry if I don't get this exactly right, but basically, the level with where they laid the concrete was gonna interfere with where the boxes were. So they just had to make that adjustment. That was the second one.
Okay.
Which wasn't nearly the same as the duct liners, but
Is that the duct liner, are those getting put on?
so they
Later, or when?
they should be doing it in the auditorium here. If I looked at the schedule again, it would have been probably, does it say on the change order by chance?
I was just looking, I don't see.
I didn't see it, but.
They give me a week by week schedule too, and if I remember right, it was end of July or beginning of August.
That they're gonna start doing.
They were gonna put them in there.
Can't be too much longer, right?
They're gonna be done by the end of August.
I didn't know if it was something they were waiting for us and then they had to order it and it was gonna take even.
I think they already ordered it,
longer. Okay,
because it was gonna take some while, but then if we wouldn't approve it here, then they'd have to cancel the order.
okay.
Because it won't come till after we approved it. Or you've approved it, I haven't approved it. You guys approved it.
I'll make a motion to approve the Alburnett additions and remodel change order number 17.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the Alburnett addition and remodels change order number 17. Any further discussion? No further
One
discussion?
question, Carly, was that number included in your figures when you said we weren't close to bouncing off that ceiling for
It was,
contingencies?
Jason, it was not included, but I just actually typed it in while we were sitting here, and it takes us down to 66, so it was 3% of our contingency.
Okay,
So we've used 66%.
thank you.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. We'll proceed to vote. All in favor signify by aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Emergency operation plan.
So, as you can see here, the emergency operation plan, and I'm actually just gonna go ahead and, what I was gonna do is if, I'm gonna share it with you individually, I'm gonna do that real quick. So I'm gonna do that fast. It is a confidential document, so if you guys want to review that, then we need to actually turn this into a closed session, and you'll see that the bottom has the description for how we change it and move a motion to do closed session, but then we'd have to come back into open session to approve it. And so, let me actually,
I think in the past, we usually haven't looked at
Yeah,
it.
I don't think you wanna share it unless we're in closed session.
true enough.
Yeah.
So, if you choose to go to closed session, then I would share it with you each individually, or give you a hard copy if you prefer, but I would not, but we can't, discuss it during an open session meeting.
Yeah.
Has it changed?
No changes whatsoever.
I guess I'll make a motion to approve the emergency operation plan.
I'll second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the emergency operation plan. Any further discussion? No further discussion, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor signify by aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Okay, confirm the date and time of next regular board meeting, and it looks like it'll be 6 p.m. on August 21st, 2023. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I will make a motion to adjourn at 7:55.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. We are adjourned.
Thank you all very much. Jason, I'm gonna go ahead and end this.
I have,
Oh,
can I talk to him?
Yeah.
all right.